type assertions in TypeScript and why they are even useful. So sometimes in TypeScript, you'll have a value in which TypeScript isn't going to be able to know the type of that value. So for example, if you use the document.getElementById method, or you get an element from the DOM, TypeScript, it will know that that element is going to be an HTML element, but it's not going to know the specific type of HTML element. For example, it's not going to know if it's an HTML input element or a list item element or different types of elements. And in these cases, you can use a type assertion to basically tell TypeScript, okay, I know that this is going to be an input type or some other type. And you assert that this will be this type, and TypeScript is just going to trust that type assertion and behave as if that value is that type, okay? So a type assertion allows you to explicitly say that some value is going to be some type, and then TypeScript is going to behave and provide type safety around that specific type, all right? So let me show you what this would look like. And this can also be thought of as narrowing to a more specific type. So if you get an HTML element from the DOM, the general type is just a general HTML element, but a more specific type would be a HTML input type. So you can use these assertions to kind of narrow your types a bit, which I'll show you why that's useful here right now. So in this example, I use the document.getElementById method here. So document.getElementById, and then I get an element, and then I can use my type assertion here using the as keyword. So following my document.getElementById call here, I can follow that with as HTML input element. And this is telling TypeScript, hey, this element that I receive back from the DOM here, it is going to be a HTML input element. And the reason this is useful is because, for example, right here in input element, it has a value property. You can access the value property on input elements. And TypeScript, it's going to be okay with me doing this here because it knows that this is an input element and has a value property. But what if I remove my type assertion here? Well, now I get an error. And the reason I get this error is because this is an HTML element now. It is a general HTML element. And not every HTML element is going to have a value property. And because of this, TypeScript is like, hey, you can't access this value property. It doesn't exist on all HTML elements. You effectively need to first narrow this type, make it more specific before we can access this value property. So one way to do this here is using the as keyword to make a type assertion and then saying it is a specific type of input element and seeing this error go away. Now there is an alternative syntax to using type assertions within your program. So here you could do the same thing, but before your call to document.getElementById, you can use kind of the generic syntax in TypeScript in which you can use a left angle bracket and then specify the type of the element. So here I could put HTML input element here like I did earlier. And this is going to tell TypeScript that this value here is going to be an input element. And then it's still going to allow me to access the value property on it because it is an input element. But if I change this to a different type of input element that might not have a value property, let's go the marquee element, we're going to get an error. So value does not exist on that element. All right. So you can use this alternative syntax here to make your type assertions to tell TypeScript the type of some value more explicitly. All right. Now, one thing that is kind of important to note here is that TypeScript is only going to allow type assertions to occur when you are going from a more general type to a more specific type, or if you're going from a more specific type to a less specific type. It can't be a completely different version of a type. And this helps prevent impossible type coercion. So here in this example on line 37, you're going to see that this doesn't work. I am assigning a value X to a string here, hello. but I'm trying to assert it as a number. And these are two completely different versions of a type. You have a type of number and a type of string. TypeScript's not going to allow this assertion to take place. And it's going to give me this error, conversion of type string to a type number, maybe a mistake because they basically have no overlap with each other. They are different versions of types. But earlier, we could use this assertion right here without an error because I'm going from an HTML element type to an HTML input element. They are the same version of a type. I'm just narrowing it here a little bit more. And I could alternatively, if I had an HTML input element, I could generalize it a little bit more to an HTML element. Now, I talked about type narrowing a bit here, and if you want to see a full video on that, make sure to click the video on the screen here, and I will see you over there.